about it. It's simple math, which is if I am the only person you're coming back to a community for, the probability that you're going to come back goes down pretty significantly. If instead there are 10 people or 20 people that could be potential sources for you to come back to or come back to the community because there's 20 different interesting people, or that there are really interesting conversations that I as one individual can't come up with by myself, then you're going to be more engaged. You're going to stick around longer.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Exponential Scale podcast. This is the show where we talk about how tiny teams with big ambitions are doing more with less, scaling smarter, not harder, and building big businesses with teams that could fit around a dinner table. I'm your host, Ron Schmilzer, and on today's episode, we're talking to Gina Bianchini, who's the founder and CEO of Mighty Networks, and I love the sound of mighty. Hi, Gina. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So you reached out and I was like, I love this topic because while we do not have a team that fits around a table, we are building software and infrastructure so that a team sitting around a table can have a massive impact. So I saw that you reached out. I was like, get me on your podcast. This sounds fantastic. So I'm excited.
Fantastic. And that's exactly the direction we'll go here, because there are emerging tools and technologies that are helping people who are in these small teams do more with less. And that's half of what the introduction. So maybe before we jump in here, a little sort of warm up for the audience, for those who aren't familiar with Mighty Networks, but also just in general, I'm going to talk about something weird. I'll talk about retention. What?
Okay.
Retention. Now, if you've ever tried to grow a business with a small team, you know that one of the most difficult problems you have isn't just finding customers, it's keeping them. And every customer you lose is a customer you have to replace, and every churned user is a hole in the bucket that you're frantically trying to fill. And if your only weapon for retention is content is becoming easier and easier to produce every day, and it's actually getting harder and harder to get attention with content, not just posts and social media, email, videos, more content. You're on a treadmill that never stops and never gets easier. But what if there was a different way? What if your customers became so connected with each other, not just to you, that leaving felt like they're abandoning friends? What if your product created a gravity so strong that staying was the obvious choice and leaving was the weird one? And that's not a feature, that's a flywheel. And my guest today, Gina, has spent the better part of 2 decades figuring out exactly how to build it. So here's sort of the reframe, if you want to think about it from leverage. Community isn't a marketing tactic, it's an operating model. And when your members bring in new members and your members retain your other members, you have just outsourced 2 of the most expensive functions on any lean team, and that's acquisition and retention to the community itself. And that's not people magic. Well, actually it is. So let's sort of dig into it. That's why our guest is so perfect. So Gina, you've been focusing on this problem for a while and you heard the frame. So dig in.
Yeah. So, Mighty Networks, we are a community platform supporting people building communities, online courses, events, both virtual and in real life. And it all stems from a mission that I have and we have, which is to help small teams create network effects, a network or a community that gets more valuable to every member with each new person who joins and contributes. And I started this work really in the early days of social networking, even before it was social media and what has evolved and become social media. And now I would argue is just content and AI media increasingly, under the belief and with the belief that the world would always value the most the ability to connect people to each other in more interesting and important ways. And I have been proven right in a lot of the predictions that I've made and my team has made around where we are today, especially with the advent of AI, where you have more and more people being pulled into and really desiring private communities with other real human beings to navigate and go through life together, whether that is professional, whether that is around health and wellness, whether that is parenting, whether that is other important interests or just things that they're not necessarily going to find in their neighborhood. And so, what is exciting about this moment is that we have never before had the tools and technology that is possible to create human connection at a level and in ways that I think is going to really usher in community renaissance, where especially as we have more and more time as a result of AI, which is the scary part of it,
Mm,
what we are working at Mighty Networks on building out is how do we harness not just AI, but software in general to create the ability for people to have instant access to the most interesting and relevant people around the things that they care about and are navigating at that time and in that place. And ultimately being able to curate and guide and scale relationships and the creation of relationships, which typically, when I say relationships and we think about relationships, it's always the transactional one-on-one for dating or for, professional networking or kind of what we've seen in the ways that I believe social media has really bastardized it. And what I mean is actually something quite different, which is imagine through both interest, but then also the quality of the software that is now available to all of us. You could, with a single prompt, be able to take an email list and organize it into 1,000 dinners across the country in, the next 2 weeks, or the ability for someone to find in their neighborhood the exact right people at the exact right time for what they are actually navigating. We have become very disconnected
mm,
to our ability to create and build relationships, especially IRL in real life,
right.
like with with real atoms and real flesh, which also sounds gross, but there has to be some distinction between the synthetic people that are going to increasingly take over our digital experiences and the real interesting, messy, flawed, but amazing human beings that I think increasingly are going to become the premium experiences.
Yeah. These are some recurring themes we've been having on these podcasts. It's interesting. We've talked to such a broad range of people here, and it always comes down to authenticity, comes down to trust. And with these communities, the whole idea of your 1,000 true fans, it's kind of funny you mentioned 1,000. The number we don't hear a lot about is million or billion. Yeah, there's millionaires and billionaires, and I guess now trillionaires. That's the world we're living in. But the funny thing is it always comes down to 1,000. And those 1,000 true fans, that really makes the community. If you have a million people, we're all disconnected. It doesn't really matter much. But if we have a
Well,
1,000 people that are deeply
yeah.
connected, that
Well,
matters a
think
lot
about it.
more.
Right. So there's, the famous Dunbar number, which is that as a human being, all we can really handle is two-way relationships with about 150 people.
Hmm.
So it's actually interesting. And I think this is where scaling is going to go. So if you think about the first generation of scalability, part of why social networks turned into social media was that the software wasn't really ready to support multi-directional relationship building in networks. It was significantly easier to build. I talk out at you, you listen to me, you might talk to me, but that I only have to consume the content that you're putting out. Much easier to scale to 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion people. It's not a surprise to me that that's what everybody was like, oh my God, like yeah, this is what we want to go do. The software wasn't ready.
Mm.
Now we are at a time and a place where we can actually deliver on the networking potential that was not possible in 2007, 2008, 2010. It is now possible. Not here yet, but possible to build in a way that wasn't before. So what does that mean? It means that when I talk about 1,000 dinners or 5,000 dinners, those are dinners. Think about it, it's like 1,000 dinners of 10 people each.
I
You
can only
start
handle
actually,
3 or 4
you,
dinners in one night myself, you know.
I know. Well, but it's impossible to scale that kind of IRL deeper connection amongst 10 people. And that's an example of software that doesn't exist yet, but will be here shortly. Will be here shortly. That actually is how you scale to 1 million. You
Mm.
just do it in a different way than what has been done. And that I think will get more and more corrupted because of the needs of the platforms that have built social media, and also just the way that, I'm born and raised in Silicon Valley. This is where I've spent my career. It's where I spent my career before I even had a career. My peers will always want to build software to the fullest extent that the software takes you, meaning, oh my gosh, could we create synthetic people? Could you create synthetic algorithms and synthetic people and synthetic experiences that have isolation and control? Not because they're evil, but just because it's a cool challenge. It's a cool engineering challenge to be able to do these things. I just personally, and my team, fortunately, think that the more interesting challenge is the harder one, which is how do you use these same tools and technologies to actually create really strong networks of people, actual human beings. And I think that that will become increasingly important and increasingly valuable.
It is. One of the things we talk a lot about on here at the Exponential Scale podcast, and what we work on at Scalabrate, which is our community of folks who are building organizations of high leverage, we scale with leverage and not labor, is that community is a superpower. Interestingly, we've been talking about this for a long time. Even before this conversation we've had here on this podcast, it's not because of this podcast. Community is a superpower because when you're a small organization, it's very hard to effectively compete, if you want to think of it that way, with a very large organization because you don't have those other measures of scale, whether it's money or people or, just offices in every country. So that means you have to do a lot more teamwork. When you're a small organization, you have to partner a lot more with other organizations. Teamwork does make the dream work. And I think a lot of this is sort of what we're hearing now. So let's bring a little of the what's
Sure.
here now today. Like what people,
Yeah.
when I look at Mighty Networks, and by the way, for our listeners, you might be thinking, what am I hearing here? Because it sounds like, Gina is talking in this language of networks, and that's because she's been done this before, right? Gina has built this category twice. She co-founded Ning with Mark Andreessen in 2004, grew it to 100 million users across 300,000 social networks, sold it for 150 million. And at that point, maybe most founders would find something else to do. But no, Gina you went back and you did it again. And it's really focused on this sort of area. So I gave you a lot to chew on there, but
Yeah.
there's a power here in community.
Yeah. So here's the beautiful thing about community is that you are absolutely right. You do not have to scale content. It you don't have to spend a bunch of money on advertising that is literally setting dollars on fire when you put it out into Meta or even Google. They take that money, they say thank you, and what happens to your numbers, you might get one person or a small handful of people, and then if you're building it on anything except your own owned and operated platform, you never see those people again. When you create a community, you are building something different. Now, good news, bad news, you're building something different. But fundamentally, if you can get somebody's email address, and instead of thinking about the email address as the value, you're thinking instead about how do I take that human being behind that email address and build relationships with other people such that they come back into a world that you have all the data for, that you have influence over, that you can create incredible experiences with. That is the most valuable thing that you can do. We have more $1 million communities on Mighty
Mhm.
Networks than any other platform. Why is that? Well, because we are focused on how our members coming into a community and meeting and building relationships with each other. There's other platforms out there that are either just purely focused on chat, or they are purely focused on content and purely focused on access to the creator or the person who started the community. What we have found is that we've been able to drive 84% member-led engagement with the way that we've built Mighty, where the focus is on every single member who comes in is celebrated. We talk about it as creating a magical first experience.
Mm.
They are as quickly as possible connected to other members who are like them, who are near them, who care about the same topics. And because we're able to do that, we have just extraordinarily different numbers than other platforms that you would see out there. So 84% member-led engagement, meaning members are coming back for each
Mm.
other, versus an industry average of about 10%. And people, when they, like other platforms, are like giving themselves high fives at 20%, just to kind of give you a sense of the scale. Then in terms of what that translates to, what you said at the beginning, Ron, is not just engagement, but retention. Because just think about it, it's simple math, which is, if I am the only person you're coming back to a community for, the probability that you're going to come back goes down pretty significantly. If instead there are 10 people or 20 people that could be potential sources for you to come back to, or come back to the community because there's
Mhm.
20 different interesting people, or that there are really interesting conversations that I, as one individual, can't come up with by myself, then you're going to be more engaged. You're going to stick around longer. So how does this actually translate? Well, over 80% annual net revenue retention, meaning when somebody joins a Mighty Network, they tend to stick around. And if you think about, what's the expectations of other community platforms, they're significantly lower than that. So we have examples of people that, before they came to Mighty, had 3-month retention. Moving to Mighty, and with all the different things that we've done, and
Mhm.
things that are visible and things that are less visible, moved almost immediately to a 9-month average retention. Just the platform made the difference. So that is one of these things that is super important for any of us as we think about scale and leverage. Is number one, how are you creating something that is about people building relationships with each other? And how is whatever content you're putting out there facilitating people doing things together versus consuming content? And I will say, the people who are kicking ass
Mm.
trust us on that. And the people that are struggling, they're like, yeah, that's, people are here for me. People are
Mm.
here
Oh,
for
I see.
me. So I think as we think about, and especially listeners of this incredibly important topic, are thinking about scale and leverage, it's, I always think about it, and maybe, this is this is a personal example, which is, my favorite parties are ones that I've helped set up and are happening and everybody's having a good time, that do not rely on me. Like, I can go upstairs and go to bed because everybody's having a great time and they're getting tremendous value and they're having just a fantastic evening, but it doesn't rely on me. And I think that is the very definition of leverage.
Oh yeah.
I think it's a very definition of exponential growth is if a party can happen, that you help facilitate, and then you don't need to be a part of it.
Right. I think it's the saying that you want the party to have life, but you don't want to be the life of the party, right? Because that's sort of like, yeah, it's a
I
lot.
love that.
That's a lot of weight
I
on one
love that.
person. Well, let's actually dig into some of the brass tacks because I
Sure.
don't know if we've mentioned this figure yet, but in 2025, your customers on the Mighty Networks platform have collectively earned over $500 million, $500 million. That's in customers. Your customers have
Yes.
generated revenue on the Mighty Networks platform. And maybe talk a little bit about that because maybe our listeners may not be so familiar with all these aspects, or maybe they've seen you at some point in their life and
Sure.
things have really emerged. So, like, what are they doing? Like, what are these successful platform operators doing? Not just to build a sticky community where people are having a good party life, if you want to think of it that way.
They're paying a lot of money for the party.
Right.
Sure. So I'll even take a step back. One of the things I think is so interesting about a lot of companies that build in public is that the things that they're excited to tell you about are everything except what are the outcomes that you are creating for your customers. So I see this a lot in terms of adjacent platforms or things out there. We at Mighty have been very clear, and it is a philosophy in our approach, which is the only number that I want out there is a number that says, can we help you achieve your goals? So the reason that $500 million is so important to us is that that is what our customers are making through the power of community, through the power of courses, through the power of low ticket, high ticket. And I'll share exactly how they are doing this on Mighty. But I think it's actually really important for all of us to kind of take a step back and ask the question, when people are building in public and they're giving themselves high fives about their revenue and not what they're helping their customers generate, what does that say in terms of their priorities? It's certainly something that I feel very strongly about. Sure, we can be out there talking about our revenue. It's a nice number. It's one my investors and myself are very happy with. But fundamentally, it is about the value that we are creating for other people. That is what matters. And that is why we exist, is waking up every day so that small team, that creator, that entrepreneur, that brand, that church, that organization, that not-for-profit, they are able to achieve their goals, whether that's a revenue-based goal, whether that's an impact-based goal, whether that is a general scalability goal. That's how we think about it. So what goes into that number and why does that $500 million, have us as a platform punching above our weight? Number one, it is because we invest in native mobile apps. Now, that sounds really basic, right? Like, duh, like, where are you spending your time, Ron? Probably on your phone. And it was one of the things that when I, came out of Ning and started Mighty was absolutely critical to how we built. We're like, we are going to create native experiences on iOS and Android. And yet, what is fascinating is a lot of other platforms, anybody who started with content, they start and think about the web first. And, there's platforms out there that are like just building for the web, like more and more features for the web, more and more features. Look at how many features we have. And look at how many features we have that are all web-based, including one of the little unfortunate dynamics for many platforms, not Mighty, is that they've taken a mobile website, which is actually the least effective way of getting people to engage on the internet, a mobile website, and then they've just put a iOS or Android wrapper around it. So it's sluggish, it's not native, it's a bad experience, and called it native mobile apps. And people have low expectations of what's possible with community because they just don't know what is possible when you actually have native development. So here's what I know to be true. On Mighty, because of the native app focus we have, 60% of all engagement is happening on the native mobile apps and 40% is happening on mobile, or I'm sorry, on web.
Hmm.
So what that means is that it leads to that 84% member-led engagement number, which then leads to that higher retention number, which then leads to that higher revenue number and profitability number. Because when people are actually hanging out with themselves, you don't need to have a team of community managers. They're self-organizing. They're running it without you. So that decision to invest very heavily in very differentiated native mobile apps, super important. The second thing has been okay, all right, full confession, my unhealthy obsession with what are the building blocks and strategies that are working? And then how do we get those strategies out to everybody that are building communities, not just on Mighty, but on any platform? And we call that community design. And so community design, proven playbook, we have trained over 20,000 people in community design. It's 9 simple parts, but they're 9 simple parts that are pretty distinct from the ways that other people would tell you to build a community. And I'm happy to go through, any of them, and I can share maybe some of the highlights that are surprising.
Yeah, definitely very interested in that.
What we've done with community design and the native mobile apps, those two pieces together are just unstoppable in terms of driving engagement. When you have engagement, you have retention. You also have more people talking about what results in transformation that they're getting from your community. And guess what happens when people talk about it? Word of mouth is the only form of advertising you don't have to pay for. And it's also, unfortunately or fortunately, the most impactful and the most successful. So that is the goal. And it's very cool when you can create incredible experiences on native mobile apps with community design. It delivers some pretty just undeniable results around member engagement, member contributions, retention, growth, and ultimately revenue and profitability.
Yeah. I'll vouch for a lot of that from my own experience in running meetups of all things. Back in the day, pre-COVID, it's still a thing.
Meetups.
It's still a thing. Although it's interesting how times have changed in terms of that kind of style of meetup.
Yeah.
But it ran
Yeah.
actually one of the largest meetups in the nation called Tech Breakfast. We got together, we
Mhm.
saw all it was just breakfast and demos. Breakfast and demos. Interestingly enough, we did it all around the country. The one place was the hardest to do morning breakfast and demos was in the Silicon Valley area because
I'm not surprised by it.
nobody wanted to wake up before 10 o'clock. That's a whole other story.
Not
So
surprised.
we just did breakfast for dinner. It was like a whole other thing, but it was super successful. And for those in the know, we actually ran the big demo event at South by Southwest for about a decade. We fed everybody breakfast tacos. So if you remember a breakfast taco demo event, that was Tech Breakfast. Now,
Oh, that's awesome.
now the interesting thing is that people still are very interested in that because to your point, like as an organizer, it wasn't about me. I wasn't doing the demos. It was the people who were there. And really what they wanted was just a platform to engage. So sort of shifting into this a little bit because you've seen this happen. It's hard to reproduce the in-person thing online, right? That's always been the challenge.
Yeah.
So what have you learned about forming these same sort of high value, sticky word of mouth? How do you do that when you don't have the same, oh, I'm going to go, and go to the wherever and just hang out with my peoples?
hmm So a couple of things. Number one, I don't think we're going to have to choose for very much longer. I think what we see as the natural evolution of these kinds of network technologies is that increasingly it's going to become trivial to organize in-person events, in-person meetups, in-person as a within the context of a digital community. So this idea of really the last 25 years that, online communities are one thing and IRL is a totally different thing. I think they are going to blend together in ways that have never been possible before. And we are incredibly excited about this because I think it gives, especially at a moment where increasingly digital is not going to be trustworthy. Like, it's just not going to be trustworthy. Like, we're going to do things around privacy. We're going to do things around validating you're a human being as a premium feature. But I think in general, we are going to want, as human beings, more and more in-person experiences. And so that's going to happen. Now, back to your original question, which is, okay, but what are those things that create faster trust and value to members digitally? So number one is being really intentional about who you're bringing together.
Mm.
And the more that you are able to bring people together who are going through a transition together, you have just saved yourself so much pain and heartache in building a community. So what's fascinating about community design is we can see the people that are actually putting those nine steps in place versus those who don't. It is night and day in terms of their results. Night and day. Night and day. Which is one of the reasons why we're like everything on our product roadmap is how do we automate more and more of the things that make it easy to do community design versus like, yeah, that's nice, but I'm going to do this thing over here. And then they come back, 30 days later and say, I don't have any engagement. Why not? It's like, okay, well, we can go back to the first principles of this. So the clearer you are on who you are bringing together, and the more that they are in a transition, the more engagement you will have. That it's really that simple, because someone who is in a transition is going to be the most motivated to join something new. They're going to be the most motivated to contribute. They're going to be the most motivated to get results and transformation, which is the promise of every community, or needs to be. And they're the most motivated to bring in new people. So that's number one. Number two is, I always think about this as like, it's critical, and I'm curious as to your reaction to this, Ron, is communities are a means to an end. What is that end? Well, it's results in somebody's life. It's value in some way, shape, or form. The most powerful and potent aspect of community is when you can offer transformation. So I talk about it as like, how is community helping those members, those people who are going through a transition? It's just like by the way, the easiest place to start, have their best year ever. And by the way, it is so much fun to think about, how does somebody have their best year ever? Like, I believe if more people spent more time thinking about for themselves and for others, what does it look like to have your best year ever? We would potentially change culture overnight.
Yeah. Well, I do like this idea. I mean, obviously, transformation and people in sort of change. Yeah, obviously, there's a lot of power there. The funny thing is, the things that this is my personal interest. The things
Sure.
that I've always loved, I love show and tell. I don't know why. I just love show and tell. I just like saying, I'm not going to have some expert here who's going to like throw a bunch of, lessons at you. Just like, what are you working on? What are you working on? I don't care how good it is. I don't care how bad it is. I don't care how ready it is. Because what always happens is like there's the spark where it's like, I never thought of it that way. Or, wow, that's like an interesting, that's just like, he's like, okay, I didn't see anything new, but like the way that you did it was different. So I don't know if that's transformation or what that is, but it's like, it's this feeling of like there's power in numbers that if we just get together and we're all kind of birds, to your point, birds of some feather, whatever that
Right,
feather is. We're birds
right,
of a
right.
feather. So to your point is like, start a community intentionally. So really focus on that. It just gets a lot to the ideal customer persona profile a lot. I don't really know where the transformation part is, or if it's just maybe this is a
Oh, well,
different kind of transformation. Yeah.
so this is actually, so that, think about that as like the Uber level. Like, why is somebody going to come back? Well, they want to accomplish something, right? Like the show and tell is I'm so glad you brought that up. So keep going down community design. There are three things, like I get asked the question, okay, great, Gina, I've got the results, I've got the big purpose, like who I'm bringing together, what they're going to get for being a part of the community, but what are they going to do together? Like, what is the actual product that I am selling? And you kind of nailed it. So in community design, we basically look at it as there are monthly themes. So monthly themes are there so that you introduce novelty to a community. I'm going to get to where the show and tell is in one hot minute. So you have monthly themes, then you have a weekly calendar, which can just be like one thing or two things, and it might be question of the week, it might be our give ask day, it might be office hours, it might be show and tell. The key thing about a weekly calendar is you're creating a habit. So you have novelty, you have a habit. Even if somebody doesn't show up, they know on Tuesdays at 9 a.m., they're going to get the readout of that morning's show and tell, for example. And then daily polls and questions. Polls and questions are unbeatable in terms of getting people to actually talk to each other in a community. So what are all of those things? And I say this over and over again, which is advice shuts a community down. Sharing stories and experiences and ideas is what opens the community up. And what you just described is why somebody comes, because they're listening for, give me some inspiration. Give me, and not inspiration. I'm so glad you said it the way you said it, Ron, is inspiration isn't the like inspirational, motivational speaker. It's, oh, oh, no way. I'm trying to solve this problem in the back of my head, especially again, because
Right.
you've got birds of a feather. And Ron just said something or just told a story or shared something he was tinkering with that just connected four dots for me. And it's why community is so potent in terms of helping people. To me, it's the absolute most effective way of navigating rapid change. You cannot navigate rapid change without being in a place where you have people sharing their stories, their experiences, and their ideas. But the minute somebody starts to feel like they need to give advice, which is, I think, the reason why I'm not a huge fan of social media creator influencer, because it's all advice. It's all advice. But when you can share those stories and those experiences and those ideas that here's what I have to give, here's my ask, now you're creating relationships that again get more valuable to the entire network with each new person who joins and contributes to those dynamics, to that culture.
Yeah, this is great. I could just talk to you for hours about this. Have to be mindful of our time because this is personally, I find this just so interesting. I hope our listeners do. They're like, "What are you talking about here?" But no, I think this is great for everybody because this does get to, I think, the reality of where we are just in this world. To everybody's point that.
Yeah.
Content creation is becoming easier and trivial. It's getting harder and harder to trust people, and authenticity is becoming so much more valued that I think this is going to leak into everything. It's going to leak into our relationships with each other, with the companies we work with our institutions. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. We're going to be coming back, I think, to, I don't know, it's not tribalism, but we're going to be coming back to this sort of this idea of finding our groups and working together. So I have a question for you first. first, and that is, I think a lot of the times when people are starting, the
Yeah.
starting problem is like one of those hard ones because there is a bit of a network effect. You want to be part of something, but also know that there are other people who are part of it. So like given that you've done this like so many times, especially for these small organizations, how do you
Yeah.
solve that starting problem? Like, the first 90 days where it's like, crickets, right? In the network.
So first of all, your first 90 days does not have to be crickets. And the data is super clear. Do you know how many people you need to actually create a sustainable community online?
I've heard something like 10 is the number, but I don't really know what the number is. Yeah.
It's 8.
Oh, okay, good. Ooh.
It's 8 people. We round up to 10, but that's exactly right. So first and foremost, it's 8 people. It's 10 people. So any community starts off feeling much more like a small group. And if you lean into that small group and you're like, all right, let's go figure out how this small group is going to be able to navigate a transition together. Now you got it. Now you got it. Everything else comes out of that. So this idea that, what's beautiful about a small group is that if you do it right, people are able to connect at a much deeper level than when you have more and more and more people. Now, again, I think this is going to get more sophisticated over time, certainly with the stuff that we're building at Mighty. But you do not need more than 10 people to create value for those 10 people. And if you create value for those 10 people, they're able to have, again, this idea of your best year ever, their best year ever. You've got something, and you've got something that you can build on. What I just described in terms of monthly themes, a weekly calendar, and daily polls and questions, that is all you need to get started. You do not need a bunch of content. You do not need a fancy course. You do not need info products. You do not need any of these things that you think you need. Like one of the other things I see a lot of is like, oh, I get discounts for like on all this stuff. It's like, yeah, whatever. Like what people want is to meet people on the same path. And I think this is the really important thing, especially for small teams. There's so much fear that just bringing 10 people together isn't enough. It's not enough. It's not enough value. It's not enough to put together an offer. But here's what I know to be true because I actually see, we process, for example, 9 billion data points a month.
Mm.
So that's how active our communities are, 9 billion data points a month. People don't have time to consume all of your content that you think you need to launch. They just don't.
Yeah.
People love people. Bring a small group together and start to build the value that way. And that is what it is. And on average, across Mighty networks are charging for an average of $48 a month. And then you can dial that up or down. This is not a cup of coffee. $5 members churn, but $48 members stick around, especially if you start with some kind of, interesting challenge. And you can dial it up or down on the pricing side. This is another thing, not to just keep being a commercial for community design, but another thing we teach in community design, because it's all based on, and validated by the data we have across our platform at Mighty, is results that you're getting for people. So what is the value of the results that you're creating? So for example, Ron, the fact that you are able to show a small team how to get exponential results, it's incredibly valuable. So that would add to the value of what you can charge. Replacement. So what is somebody paying for today that they will not have to pay for as they are a member of your network, of your community? That'd be the replacement. So that can dial up or down that $48. And then finally, respect. So one of the things I see over and over again is that, somebody, we call everybody who's our customers hosts, but hosts will be like, oh, well, I can't charge for the first one, as if the first one's not good. My answer to that is always, so when you hire or you offer your consulting services, for example, that basically the same logic is, oh, well, I couldn't charge a new client because I haven't worked with that client before. On what planet would anyone do that?
Yeah.
On zero planet would they do that. And so I look at it and reframe it to your starting cohort, those starting 10 people, they might get the most attention that they're ever going to get from anybody in any way, shape, or form because it is new, right? So you dial these things sort of up and down. And I think what we're going to start to see more and more of is that the value of hosting a community, hosting a meetup, hosting an event, hosting a podcast that then attracts people together is that as we get worse and worse at our own social skills with other human beings, the person that can facilitate our ability to meet and build relationships with other human beings in and of itself is probably the most important job, not just for any individual in that network of people, but for society. Because if we don't have more people who are playing this role of host, then we're going to have that continued fraying of social fabric that, again, all these dudes that I've grown up with, the more that they're talking about, like, this is the best thing ever for humanity. It's like, well, wait a second, what about society? And that's where what we're building at Mighty and with, the team we've brought together, it is all about how are we helping with software and the latest software create these strong networks of people. But the hosts of these networks, that is a new role that the value isn't the content you create or the expertise that you have. It's your ability, like Ron, your ability to introduce me to cool people, I will pay you for. And that is increasingly going to be the case.
You're on. This is fantastic. Funny thing is, I had all these lists of questions. I just threw those questions out. We're just having a good conversation here, and I think that's because so much of this just sort of rings true to my own experiences. But I think even for a lot of our listeners are thinking, "Wow, never really thought about community this way." And we talk about this repeatedly that when you're operating and you're trying to operate with leverage, it's like the best thing you can do is have that stickiness and have that thing where people are coming to you because they want to be with you. And you're right. It's like, it doesn't have to be millions and millions of people who have a loose connection. And then it's like somebody offers something better. They're here today, gone tomorrow. I think it's like the analogy with weeds and gardens. Weeds grow fast, but the roots are really shallow. So, they're not here to last.
But if it becomes trivially easy for those 10 people to come together, those 10 people become 100, and those 100 people become 1,000, and those 1,000 become 100,000. And that's how you build towards 1,000,000. But that power of any network, any community is, who are your friends that you're coming back to? And that, I think, is something that we have done a very good job of enabling at Mighty, and it's the seed of where we are taking the platform next.
Sounds great. Well, I have a couple rapid fire questions for you that we always do at the end here. But before we do that, like, what are some of the largest networks on Mighty Networks right now? I mean, what are some of their numbers? What do they look like, if you can share that?
Yeah. So we have an amazing parenting network called The Reconnected that I think is over 100,000 members. Matthew Hussey, who is a relationship expert with an incredible YouTube subscriber base, has an amazing community in that same range. The other thing that I think is super interesting about our Mighty Networks and why, we don't actually give ourselves high fives for the many super large networks that we have is the reality is that we have other networks that are making $50,000 a month from like 5 people.
Wow.
Yeah. So start to do it. So that's why from where I'm sitting, the more important piece is what is the essence of whether you're doing something high ticket, whether you're doing something low ticket, like what are those levers that allow you to create something of value, whether you have 5 members or 10 members or 100,000 members or 500,000 members. But I think we've kind of lost we've lost the perspective because of social media on the fact that it really does come down to how well can you articulate who your ideal member is, help them find each other, and then really build the value proposition, that offer of monthly themes, a weekly calendar, daily polls and questions, and then dial in how they are actually the ones bringing in more and more people. And then you look at it that way, anybody can do this.
There you go. Well, good. Well, I will basically make sure in the show notes we're going to share those resources, the 9
Great.
tips, the 9 insights. So send it with us. We'll post it in our show notes for those of you who want to listen. Of course, point you at Mighty Networks and what they're doing and a lot of things we talked about here. So our rapid fires. First one, always talk about tools because people want to know. So here's my question. What's one tool or AI or automation or whatever it is that you absolutely can't run your business without? The one that gives your team the 10x leverage every single week?
Yeah, I would say the people who are making exponential contributions to Mighty today are experts in Claude.
Okay. Claude, yeah, it's killing it right now. That's for sure. So now let's talk about processes. So think about the people who are trying to grow. They're small, but they're trying to gain scale. They're trying to gain that significance, right?
Yeah.
So what is one, you've been through this before, starting from zero. So what is one system or process that every leverage first team should have in place by the time that they hit at least $1 million in revenue that separates the scalers from the grinders, right? The ones who are scaling through leverage and the ones where it's like they made $1 million, but it's going to be just as hard to make 2 million. No, you don't want to do that. So what would you maybe tell them to start doing or maybe tell them to stop doing today?
Yeah. Look, I would say, following the principles of community design, the thing that I would be looking for is how much of your business is happening without you. How much of your business is happening and how are you building so that your business happens without you? So how much are you building a network around your business as opposed to, I need to go find more people all the time to buy my thing versus I have a network. And what's beautiful about creating a network, especially before you even have a product, is that it forces you to create value higher up in the funnel than your product or service because, and then by the way, then you own that. That is an owned channel for you higher up in your funnel in ways that I think are absolutely critical for a new team.
That's golden. Build a business that can operate without you. Oh, so many layers to that. I love it. And then I think final tip. I know you've given a lot of tips, you've given a lot of advice here, but maybe if there's one additional piece
Not
of
advice, because advice shuts the conversation down, Ron, and
I'd
we
say
can
a tip.
go.
What about a tip?
I thought that tip's good. Tip's good.
Insight, a little spark. How about we'll use the word spark. What spark could you give to a founder who's running a tiny team, this dinner table sized team right now, who does want to scale? Maybe some additional piece of advice, maybe that's especially important nowadays.
I would say that the way that social media and the algorithms, especially for entrepreneurs, they have dialed in to our insecurity. They've dialed into our insecurity. And one of the best things I have done is I have just stopped. Like, I'm not like spending time on social, any platform. Sometimes I post whatever, but the reason, and I have not missed it, is that first of all, increasingly with algorithmic feeds, you don't know who's behind that entrepreneurial advice. You just don't know. Like, is the person who's basically saying, oh, this is how you build an info product and sell $1 million, have they ever done it? You have no evidence that they have. So when thinking about where to spend your time as an entrepreneur, I think these kinds of conversations are significantly more valuable than a Twitter or X feed or an Instagram feed or a set of TikTok reels. Those are just, I think, increasingly unhelpful.
Well, that's great.
And then the second thing that every single one of my venture-backed, successful entrepreneur friends has set up is their own board of advisors using Claude or using ChatGPT so that you can instead take all that time that you were spending like flipping through reels or flipping through TikTok and actually take your actual challenges, your actual business, your actual questions, and access the greatest minds and greatest stories of a generation. It's like, so it's kind of the thing that I would say, at least, it's super obvious to do, but a lot of my friends are like, hey, I just did this thing. And then somebody else is like, oh yeah, I did that like 3 months ago.
Yeah.
But I think it is even more important for any of us as entrepreneurs or as business owners to be vigilant with where and how we spend our time.
That's great. Well, that's why we need more show and tell. The more I show, the more you'll see, the more we can, move our pace, advance it. Well, this has been fantastic. I really love this podcast here and being mindful of our guests' time and of course, our audience's time too, because everybody's time is valuable. So I want to give you that mantra for the week. Mantra for the week is stop creating content for your customers and start creating connections between them, because community that retains itself is the most leverage first growth engine a small team can build. Hopefully we gave you that inspiration here. I'm actually I'm going to be playing a little bit more with Mighty Networks. So I'm going to get off here. I'm going to be like, what the new futures on that one? Sounds really exciting. So I really want to thank you again, Gina, for participating and sharing all of your fabulous insights and tips with our audience.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And if you love this interview with Gina Bianchini, I want you to hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and share it with that founder friend who's still wondering why their content marketing isn't building the retention they need and hasn't figured out yet that the answer might be sitting right inside their existing customer base. So thank you all very much. I want you to think big, stay lean, and scale smarter. Micro teams aren't the future, they're the now. If this episode got you fired up, hit that subscribe button, share it with your crew, and join the movement over at scalebrate.com. That's SCALEBRATE.com. Till next time, think big, stay lean, and scale smarter. Because you're not a tiny team, you're a micro team with mega potential. So get exponential, and thanks for tuning in to the Exponential Scale podcast.